My name is Alethea Alexander. I am on faculty at the University of Washington. I am an assistant professor of dance, and I have a master's degree, MFA in dance from the University of Washington. Modern dance was it sort of evolved out of ballet is usually my favorite way to say that. There were creators, there were movers who were bored with the option of ballet, who wanted to break that mold a little bit and decided to start exploring different ways of using the body on stage to tell stories, to tell about humanness. It was this re-examining of what was possible when you look at bodies moving. Can we do away a little bit with character in favor of looking a little bit more at the essential materials of the medium, movement, emotion, humanity, as opposed to character, storyline, narrative. So in the United States, we have a lot of different figures in early modern dance pioneering, many of them women, which I find really lovely to think about as a woman in dance myself. I can tell you that Martha Graham was a hugely influential modern dance pioneer in America. And one of the things that she really valued was trying to understand, instead of narratively, where does emotion lie or how does it represent itself? She was interested in looking a little bit at physically, where does humanness lie? Where does emotionness lie? And for her, she decided that physically, and I think this had a lot to do with her identity as a woman, her emotional heart lie in her guts. She also had a school in New York in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, I mean, on from there, but she had a school where she trained other dancers, and a lot of dancers who made work more contemporarily in New York began by studying not solely, but at least a little bit with Martha Graham at her school and in her technique. Doris Humphrey and Charles Weidman met at a workshop, I think with the Danishan company, and they, by they I mean Doris Humphrey and Charles Weidman were really invested in dance in this time when they met, but were not as interested in the aesthetics that the Danishan company was working with as they were in sort of trying to develop their own technique and their own expression. People talk about Charles Weidman as being really interested in gravity, but I think the relationship of his movement to gravity was more about the way that explosion and growth and energy can come out of the floor as it was about falling into the floor. So when I think about Charles Weidman and gravity, I don't think about heaviness necessarily of the body. I think about this sort of spring-based in and out, up and down, this really active presentation of physicality. And again, for him, in my knowledge and in my readings about dance history, that came from trying to express the sort of energy and growth of the American economy and social system at the time. Art often comes out of times of stress and times of economic and social change, which is a constant partner for depression. I'm sure you're familiar with the sort of famous story of the Rite of Spring, Nijinsky's Rite of Spring, which was performed by the Ballet Russe, and there were famously riots. There were people who came to the theater to watch this new production created by a ballet prodigy, Nijinsky, on a ballet company, the Ballet Russe. And when they came to the theater, they saw these shapes and this effort and weight that was far from the beauty that they anticipated seeing when they came to this ballet space. And apparently people got so angry that they threw things, yelled, and left the theater before the piece was finished. I think that there was such an aggressive reaction to what people saw in that theater with the Ballet Russe, not because what they saw was unsightly, not because what they saw was so far from what they wanted to see, or not because what they saw was so different from anything else that was happening that they hated it, but because they intended to go see ballet and they were not met with ballet. There were a lot of Black creators in the United States. I can think of Katherine Dunham off the top of my head. Pearl Primus is another very influential creator in modern dance. And these people were touring. They were collecting little troops of touring artists, performers, dancers that they had pulled together to share in their choreographic ideas. And they were taking their work through New England and in the north part of the eastern side of the United States, but they were also going to the south. And even in New England, And then, of course, especially in the South, when these Black creators were touring, they had a really, really hard time finding hotels to stay in, restaurants to eat at. And often they were touring groups of mixed company. So you'd have, Pearl Primus, for example, had drummers who were white and who were Black. And she had performers who were white and who were Black. And her husband was white and she was Black. And so often they would pull in their little caravan to a hotel space or to a restaurant space, and the proprietors of these spaces would only allow the white members of the troupe into the restaurant or into the hotel. And so that was another thing, especially for spreading these new ideas or more diverse identities in those ideas. It was really a challenge, but I think a challenge that was ultimately met with growth. Katherine Dunham was an African-American woman who was born in Illinois, if I'm not mistaken, in the early 1900s. And she was quite a prolific Black creator in modern dance in the United States. So Katherine Dunham was one of the first creators who used her lived experience in her own body as an African-American woman, and also did anthropological research when she traveled to the Caribbean and looked at movement qualities and social qualities that were happening in these other places, other identities, other cultural spaces. And she built a technique that blended Afro-Caribbean movement and American modern dance aesthetics. Black dancers, Black bodies, Black identities had a lot to process and a lot to say. What I want to say is I think we need to be grateful for and make room for listening to the Black dancers who found voice and who insisted upon being seen. Often modern dance gets compared to ballet, and rightly so, because modern dance is sort of a devolution or evolution or just counterpoint to ballet, and it came out of responding to ballet as a form. And ballet generally through time has been really well received and has just gotten a lot of attention and a lot of economic support, and that's because it comes out of a history of the elite. Ballet was birthed in court spaces, and it was made popular by people with a lot of money and a lot of power. And so ballet is often pretty well received because it comes out of spaces where power lives. So you have to appreciate that power in order to be part of the power structure. Modern dance has a different history in that it doesn't come out of a place of so much power. And so I think there's not been this deference to the creation of modern dancers, the same way that there is a deference to the creation of ballet. Audiences have been able to make up their own minds and to be critical about what they're seeing. I'm really interested in this idea, I don't care about that idea, and modern dance is sort of the same way. Through history, it's been more of an accessible, more of a human, and this was its goal, more of a human endeavor, more of a human process. And so when human beings go to see that process, you get to make up your mind. Do you like it? Do you not? And that I don't like it is an acceptable opinion. That was new for dance, I suppose. That I don't like it is an okay opinion to have. This doesn't speak to me, as opposed to ballet, where it's beautiful and it's elegant and it's adorned. So the way that modern dance technique has evolved through time is similar again to the way that other art forms have evolved through time. In that often what happens with an idea, with an artistic expression, is that people will play with whatever that form is, whatever that notion is, for a certain amount of time until it becomes exhausting or overwrought or uninteresting anymore, and then you kind of turn around and say, well, how can we get rid of these things that are boring, that we don't want anymore? How can we turn it around and try something new?
The essential of dance is not in words, but is in movement. Now that movement is embodied in each one of us.